I first came to Japan in August of 1988. I was 31 years old. Can you imagine what I knew about Japan before that? It's an easy question for me, and I can answer it very quickly. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. Really, I was 31 years old and knew nothing about Japan. I had zero knowledge. I think that some foreigners came to Japan because of a long interest in Japan. Maybe they were interested in Zen, maybe they were interested in the world of anime, and maybe they were interested in Japanese technology. Not me. I came to Japan knowing absolutely nothing about Japan. Nothing. Actually, as a young man, I liked to travel, but it never occurred to me to travel to Japan. In my 20s, I took a number of trips abroad, but always to Europe, England, Scotland, Ireland, Amsterdam, Florence, Freiburg, Paris, and the south of France. And why did I like to travel? Well, I probably had some of the same reasons that most people have, but in my case, perhaps one of the biggest reasons was I never felt comfortable living in the United States. I needed to escape from the United States from time to time. And why did I feel uncomfortable living in the United States? I could talk about that for hours and hours, but before I talk about it briefly, let me just say that when I was 31 and feeling uncomfortable in the United States and wishing there were a place that I could feel comfortable, I suddenly, like Terry, I suddenly had a chance to take an all-expenses-paid trip to Japan. And I took that chance. And as I've already said, I arrived in Japan for the first time in 1988. And I felt comfortable enough in Japan that I've been here ever since, more or less. There were about 15 months when I was 34 and 35 when I attended graduate school in the US. But except for that, I have been in Japan since 1988. Believe me, if I had not felt comfortable in Japan, I wouldn't have stayed here so long. So that's the first point I want to make. All these years, I had never felt so comfortable in the United States. This, I think, is a very important point. So why didn't I feel comfortable living in the United States? It's complicated, but let me try to explain at least a part of my feelings. One, my parents divorced when I was 6 years old. At that time, divorce was less common than now, and I always felt different from, and sometimes isolated from, the other kids my age. And the details of why my parents got divorced, that was something that was never talked about. I was 8, then 10, then 12, and I was always wondering what had happened and why. I remember seeing my biological father once after the divorce. I was 18 at the time. It seemed too late to have a meaningful conversation. At least that's how I felt then. I remember how embarrassed I felt trying to talk to him. The home I grew up in was a good one. My mother and my new stepfather were good people. But the divorce was never talked about. The inability to talk honestly about the divorce especially strained my relationship with my older brother. Now I'm 65 years old, and still, he and I have never talked about our biological father. So this too is an important point. I needed to talk about that divorce. I needed to understand what happened. But communication on the topic seemed impossible. Sometimes it made me very sad. I'm not blaming anyone. As all of you know, sometimes it's very difficult to talk to the people who are closest to you about things that are very, very important. I was good at sports, especially American football and track. So I became a popular boy. At least I think I was kind of popular. But I definitely felt different from others, especially when I was in high school. I heard other boys talk about their plans for college and careers, but I could never understand why I should go to college or why it was so important to find a job and a career that would provide a big paycheck. I often dreamed of going into the woods and chopping down trees and building a log cabin and making a garden and raising chickens. I had no experience doing any of those things, but I dreamed about them just the same. I couldn't tell that dream to any of my classmates or teammates. They would have laughed at me. But I was never interested in wearing a business suit and being a businessman. Sometimes I felt that I could become a teacher, but the people around me didn't encourage me. Teachers weren't respected very much, they said, and teachers didn't make much money. I couldn't understand why everyone was so much interested in making money. A lot of the boys at my school liked to fight. They liked to pick on others. They liked to intimidate others. I couldn't understand them. I hated the idea of fighting and the idea of hitting another person just to show how tough I was. Yes, from a very, very early age, I was a pacifist. A sissy, you might say. And I don't know why, but some of the boys at my school sometimes talked about beating up black people. There were only a few black kids in my school. I didn't really think about their skin color at all. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have thought more about what it was like to be one of a few black people in a very large group of white people. But I definitely didn't have any bad feelings about black people. And I absolutely couldn't understand why some of the white boys thought it might be fun to beat up black people. So yes, high school was the first time I realized that people very close to me had strong racist feelings. And I absolutely couldn't understand it. And I definitely did not want to be friends with those people. Actually, high school wasn't the first time I thought about racism. Even when I was in elementary school, news about the civil rights movement was often on TV. And I heard Martin Luther King Jr. speak many times. I'm sure I didn't understand everything he said, but still his words and his voice could make me cry. Don't tell anyone and don't laugh, but sometimes I used to imagine that I was Martin Luther King Jr. So the fact that I felt racism around me and I couldn't really understand why skin color could be so important made me uncomfortable. Actually, the words white and black didn't make much sense to me. I didn't see anyone who was really white. I didn't see anyone who was really black. One last big thing that made me uncomfortable growing up, and this is very, very similar to Terry's story. One last thing that made me uncomfortable growing up and living in the United States was Christianity. When the preacher talked of love and compassion and mercy, well, all those things seemed pretty good. But when I heard people say, Jesus was the only Son of God, you have to say you believe Jesus was the only Son of God, that he died and rose from the dead and went to heaven so that you could go to heaven. Well, I just couldn't get myself to say, I believe that. How could I know why Jesus died? How could I possibly know if Jesus was in heaven? And how could I even believe there was a heaven? I wanted to be a good person, but I was often told that in order to be a good person, I had to be a Christian. And I just couldn't understand it. I've always been a spiritual person, but I've never felt the need to decide on one single true religion. And that was definitely another reason why I felt uncomfortable living in the United States. And there were people around me that they were Christians. They said they were Christians, but they didn't behave in the way that Jesus said they should. Those people said that it was okay to do bad things, because Jesus would forgive them. All I could do was wonder how they could be such hypocrites. I graduated from Furman University, a private school in South Carolina, in 1980. I graduated number one among 419 students. Yay for me. But I had no idea what to do with my life. I loved literature, and I thought I wanted to be a writer, and I tried to write. But I also believed that I was an adult and had to support myself. For 5 or 6 years, I worked in restaurants so that I could pay for food and a place to live, and I dreamed of being a writer. Then, in late 1987, I saw an advertisement in a newspaper to become an assistant English teacher in Japan. Would you like to work in Japan? The advertisement said. Oh, yes, I might, I thought. Do you have a college degree? Oh, yes, I do, I replied to the newspaper. No teaching experience necessary. Good, I thought, because I don't have any. And that's how I first came to Japan. I was hired to work as an assistant, AET, an assistant English teacher in the junior high schools of Miyazaki Prefecture. So that's how I could come to Japan, knowing nothing about Japan, knowing nothing about being a teacher, and not being able to speak Japanese at all. Not at all. Okay. Now let's jump ahead 22 years. I had lived in Japan a long time. I was working at Shizuoka University as a teacher of American literature, and I still had a dream of being a writer, of writing a novel. Of course, setting is very important. For the last 22 years, I'd lived in Japan. It seemed the best setting for me to write about. The easiest setting for me to imagine was the Japanese setting. And it seemed to me that in Japan, there were a lot of people who misunderstood foreign cultures, who had stereotypical ideas about people in other countries. Just like there are people all over the world who have stereotypical ideas about people in other countries. And people all over the world who misunderstand others. All my life, I'd seen people misunderstand others. All my life, I'd seen people unable to communicate with others when they most needed to. It was something that made me very sad, and it was something I needed to write about. Also, in Japanese classrooms, I heard for years and years how important it was for Japanese students to learn English. And I wondered how true that was. Because the fact was, there were lots of Japanese people who couldn't speak English, but who could lead good and satisfying and meaningful lives. There are many people like that now. Maybe they can't speak English, but they're good mothers and good fathers. They're good members of their communities. They're good employees. Anyway, I couldn't help but wonder, was English really essential for everyone? So I wanted to write a story about cultural misunderstanding. And I wanted to write about a young boy living in a rural area, a place where hardly anyone could speak English, a boy who wondered if it really was necessary to learn English. Soon I was imagining a boy named Kenta, who loved his rice-growing grandfather very much, a boy who loved the beautiful nature in and around their small village. As soon I realized this boy, Kenta, that he was very sensitive. And because he was sensitive, he wanted to be a poet. And then suddenly, before I knew it, my character began to like English. Okay? Things like that happen when you imagine stories. Your imagination goes many ways. Then I imagined that when foreign English teachers began to visit his school and he began to develop an interest in both English and foreign cultures, he would gradually become aware of his grandfather's prejudices, as well as his need to decide how far his personal street should extend into the world. I imagined he would have to reconcile his love of home and family with his grandfather's lingering emotions from an almost forgotten war. That became my first novel, Along the Same Street. The main thing I want to tell you is this. I had lived in Japan a long time, and I felt I could write a story set in Japan, but I wasn't especially interested in introducing Japan to the world. What I was interested in writing about, what I was interested in was writing about subjects that had been important to me my whole life. Prejudice, the difficulties families can have talking about the most important things, the difficulty a young person can have escaping the burdensome influence of those around him, the difficulty a young person can have discovering the most important thing inside himself or herself. These are themes that you could find in a story set anywhere in the world. So while I think I'm trying to write about universal themes, while I think I'm not intentionally writing stories that introduce Japan, I can also say that living in Japan has made me feel more comfortable being the writer I naturally am. Let me tell you a brief story about Ray Bradbury, an American science fiction writer of the 20th century. He had a long career writing short stories set in outer space, and many of these stories had religious themes. So he was a writer who wrote about religion his whole life. Okay? At the very end of his career, he read for the first time in his life an article that introduced Zen Buddhism. Before that, he had never heard of Zen Buddhism. But suddenly he realized that he had been, at least in part, a Zen writer his whole life. He had always been a Zen writer, he just didn't know it. This is how I feel too. When I was a small boy, dreaming about living in the woods, creating my own garden, I think I was thinking in a Zen sort of way. I'm not so interested in studying the details of Zen Buddhism, but I think that living in Japan has made it easier for me to live with my natural Zen feelings. Living in Japan has made it easier for me to nurture the natural feelings I have for nature. Living in Japan has made it easier for me to nurture my natural non-dualistic view of the world. And being able to hike in the mountains surrounding Umagashima over there. Okay. And from time to time, being able to hike in the Japanese Alps. Well, this has had an enormous influence on my writing life. You will find expressions of my love of nature in all my books. And you can feel my love for Shizuoka and my love for Umegashima, in particular, in When a Sissy Climbs a Mountain in May. And one more thing. In Japan, I don't feel, generally speaking, that people value money in the same way as they do in the United States. Anyway, I don't feel the pressure to make a lot of money is as strong here as it was in the United States. Of course, that may be partially because I will, to some extent, always be an outsider here in Japan. Many people expect me to be a little bit strange. So I feel really, really free to nurture my inner self here in Japan. Nurturing the inner self is very important for everyone, but it's very, very important for a writer. I'm sure of that. To me, one of the saddest cultural phenomena in Japan is katenai rikon. I think it especially makes me sad because it always makes me remember those times in my childhood when I felt how impossible it was for our family to talk about things that needed to be talked about. And it also makes me think about cultural and political divisions all over the world, with so many people unable to have meaningful communication with people on the other side. For years, it's something that I've wondered. How can people who distrust others, who feel they've been abused by others, begin to talk to those others? And if they can't even begin to talk, how can they ever begin to solve whatever problems are between them? My latest novel, Spider Lilies Bleed, discusses these communication issues, as well as the need we all have to discover and nurture our inner selves. The setting is Japan. Tsuyoshi and Nozomi, the unhappy married couple, are both Japanese. Rumi, the troubled daughter, is Japanese. But it's a story that you could discover anywhere in the world. When I wrote about this particular Japanese family, I was not trying to explain the Japanese family to all the world. I am not a sociologist. I just imagined all these people in their very difficult situations and wondered if there was any way that any of them could ever come to believe in hope again. And then I wrote their story. Their story happens more or less everywhere in the world. But the spider lilies themselves, no, I'd never seen one until I came to Japan. And in the novel, as the title suggests, spider lilies became an essential part of the storytelling. I feel really lucky that I currently live in a neighborhood in Shizuoka in which every year I can enjoy the spider lilies. The yellow of the rice fields, the blue of the sky, the wet blood red of the spider lilies fill me with all sorts of powerful emotions. Emotions that are necessary to even begin thinking about writing a novel. Okay, to summarize, the themes that I write about are ones I began thinking about long before I ever thought I might live in Japan. But because I've lived in Japan for so long, Japan has become the easiest setting for me to write about. And living in Japan has helped me make closer contact with my natural Zen feelings. And I found so many inspiring images in Japan. For example, a little boy with his grandfather pulling a daikon from the ground. The mejuro flitting among the tree branches, the sweet art of the heavy ears of rice, the yashio leaves, all that bright yellow and red and green up against a shimmery blue sky along the ridges of the Umegashima Mountains. A kamoshika, only a few steps away, looking me directly in the eye. And all those mysterious season-marking spider lilies, all those swirling petals in constant motion, the constant motion of this beautiful, ever-changing, non-dualistic world we live in. Thank you. Today, I'd like to read 3 short passages from my fiction, 2 from Spider Lilies Bleed, and 1 from When a Sissy Climbs the Mountain in May. Spider Lilies Bleed has 4 different narrators, 3 women and 1 man, the husband Tsuyoshi. The first passage I'm going to read is a scene in which Tsuyoshi wanders the town in a drunken stupor. He's usually not such a big drinker, but his girlfriend has just broken up with him, and he knows his relationships with his wife and daughter have reached a terrible state. The chapter is called Endless Circles. Many parts of the novel describe the joy of being out in nature or the joy of creating art, but not this chapter. This chapter is different. Okay. Chapter 7, Tsuyoshi, Endless Circles. These neon lights, so many more than there used to be, and more glare. Our regular place, Shalala, it's around here, but the whole street, they've done something with the lights. Maybe it's the time of night. Maybe they juice everything up hour by hour. Hey, watch where you're going. I've stopped. I've grabbed hold of a heavy signboard, set out on the sidewalk. I'm looking back over my shoulder. Go home, old man. Are you talking to me? He was talking to me, but he's walking away. Geez, where in the hell is it? Hey, bud, I think I know what you're looking for. I look around, all around, finally see a man in a tight suit and skinny tie. He stands leaning back against a concrete wall, a couple of steps down an alley. His hair slicked back. He's tipping his head back. I walk over. I'm looking for Shalala, I say. Yeah, of course you are, he says. Look, bud, nothing to worry about. This is your 3rd time by here. I know, and you know what you want. Where is here, I say. Is here near Shalala? Don't know no place like that. He tips his head back again. I step closer to the entrance of the alley. He points to a pink door in a frame of fur. Then he takes a wallet from his breast pocket, pulls from it a plastic insert filled with pictures of girls. Girls dressed up, girls dressed down. I got to find Shalala, I say, stepping away. Yeah, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Maybe I'm in Tokyo. Maybe I worked a day in Tokyo and just forgot. Somebody took me out for a drink, and now I've gotten myself into some neighborhood I've never been in before. The lights, they're squealing. Google Maps, Shalala, I can check. Yeah. Don't have my phone. I must have left it in that other place. A couple of girls, probably college students. One jerks on the other's arm. They shift in unison off the sidewalk and into the street, walk right by me. I want to sit down. I want to lie down. I try to breathe in the green of a traffic signal. Hey, bud, it's you. some guy says. He's young with slick back hair. Took a little longer this time around. You ready to talk? I need to sit down. Sure you do. I just want to sit. Just want to rest. Everybody's got to sit. That's the rule. I mean, I need to sit now. You got a toilet? He shuffles me down the alley through the pink furry door and into dull light, and then into semi-darkness. And then a girl in a bathing suit and high heels is leading me to the toilet. Then I'm sitting in a kind of booth. A girl is asking me if I want to choose her. I'm in the dark, but all else is glare. Her hair is glare. Her hair is blue glare. I don't want to choose anything. I just want to sit. I try to remember if my flute is in the car. Another girl, a cat girl, whiskers and all, asks me if I want to choose her. She's all smiles until I assert again, I don't want to choose anybody or anything. She walks away into the glare. 6 girls emerge from a more distant glare. They're in pink leotards. They're wearing above-the-knee boots, red boots. They're on a stage. They twirl long pink boas. Pink circles go round and round and round. They should synchronize their dance. I don't know why they don't. They're all smiling, but some are smiling while managing to look bored. Except for the costumes and how tall the girls are, it seems a quickly rehearsed elementary school performance. The blue-haired girl comes back and sits beside me. She asks me for 5,000 yen. I just want to sit, I say. That's fine, she replies. That's what everyone does, but it's 5,000 yen. You want champagne? No, I just want to sit. Can I have champagne? I don't care. Round and round go the pink boas. A champagne bucket and 2 glasses make landings on the table. I close my eyes. Could you find a place to sit? It's another guy with slick back hair. Yeah, I say I sat a lot. And then I'm walking. But I don't know where I'm walking. I'm leaning on a pole. I'm walking again. A bus stop. I'll get the bus. But I don't know which bus might go where. Why are the timetables so small? Then I remember I have a car. I remember where I parked. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. A young girl in ordinary clothes is taking my arm. She's got a big powdery smell and lots of lipstick. Where are you going? To my car. That's maybe not such a good idea. I really just want to sit. You want to come with me? You got somewhere to sit? Sure, you can sit all you like. We walk. The air is cool. Thank goodness it's cool. She stops, makes a phone call. Listen, she says, I need to get some money from you. Money? More money? Just to sit? I look at her, really look at her for the first time. Maybe I'm sobering. She looks about 18. Oh, sorry, I say, I gotta go. You're gonna kill yourself, she says. But I've already pulled my arm free and am going full steam ahead, and I don't look back, and the sidewalk leans this way and that, and something grips hard on the lining of my stomach. I see the main building of the Umaoka Bank and remember where my car is. But first, I go to a little park behind the bank and empty beer and tequila and cheap champagne and who knows what else into some bushes. in the chapter. The second passage I want to read from this book is also from Spider Lily's Bleed, also narrated from Tsuyoshi. He's describing a time in the past when he and Nozomi are visiting a fertility clinic. Physically, they were capable of producing a baby, but emotionally, they were incapable of making love. Thus, they had decided to create a baby without making love. In this sort of situation, of course, the greater burden falls on the mother-to-be. Please understand that I realize that. But that does not mean that it is not a difficult procedure, at least psychologically, for the man as well. In this scene, Tsuyoshi has just been asked to provide sperm for a second time. This chapter is for adults only, so if you're not an adult, you should go outside. So this is Tsuyoshi talking. Chapter 29, Tsuyoshi, vile, vile. We never slept together again. There must have been a point in time when there was no longer any physical reason for not trying again. But by the time I was confident such a time had come, the gap between us had opened unbearably wide. Gap, wall, whatever it was, I didn't think she wanted to get rid of it, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. It was wrong not to talk, a big mistake, my mistake. 4 years later, we did start talking about a baby again, but with the wall, the gap, whatever it was, as tall, as wide as ever. How do two people with a solid concrete wall between them talk? A wall as high as the sky, as wide as the ocean. And yet, each of them is desperate to hear something, so they try. They try conversing across a minefield that neither is willing to set foot in. Is a baby, is that what you want? Is that what you want? But don't ask, but then don't ask. But there's another way. But why? What else is there? But would a doctor, what else is there? And this was a mistake too. Our mistake, my mistake. I sat in the doctor's office and lied. We lied. You're taking into consideration Nozomi's cycle? Yes, we both answered. And how many times a month among the likely days are you having relationships? 4 or 5, you said. Yes, usually 4 or 5, I echoed. I felt as if I were talking into a mountain of fog, as if I were being swallowed by a mountain of fog, as if I were becoming the mountain of fog. And when you release, he said, well, it's in the normal way, it's deep inside. Yes, I answered. And the interval between relationships, on average, how many days? 2, 3 days during that part of the month, you said. The doctor said he couldn't really see why Nozomi wasn't getting pregnant. Her body seemed to be okay, and my sperm were pretty good. The nurse handed me the plastic cup, and for a second time, I went into the little room with its bookshelf of magazines. I sat on a bright banana yellow sofa. I put the cup down. Right then, more than anything in the world, I wanted to make a baby. I wanted to be a father, but not like this. I wanted to come home from work and talk. I wanted to hear what Nozomi had done that day, what was on her mind. I wanted her to ask me stuff. I wanted to cook together. I wanted us to talk while we ate. I wanted to turn on some music and dance her around the room. I wanted to put my hand on her hip. I wanted to kiss her lips. Then I would not need this plastic cup. It was an ordinary cup, but I imagined it a vile sort of vial, something a crazed scientist might brew smoky concoctions in. So what was I to think about? Was I supposed to fantasize about Nozomi? Was I supposed to imagine her body opening up to mine? And these magazines, was I supposed to imagine conceiving a baby with one woman while imagining a sexual experience with another? Was that a good way for a man to take the first step into fatherhood? I tried to remember a time I'd been with Jun Miura, but when I did, I could only see us walking along a river, something we'd never actually done. It was an image that didn't help at all with my immediate problem. It was wrong. It was all wrong. We shouldn't have let the silence squeeze out all else. But we did. Now there was nothing right that she and I could do together. And that nothing filled my head until I was nothing, until I felt myself a selfless sack of skin, a sack that only held its shape with thought-free bones and emotionless muscles and tissue. With the cup, the cold vial, I went behind the curtain. Wasn't that great? A locked door and a curtain. I took a magazine with me, but I couldn't open it. If there had been a physical reason why Nozomi and I couldn't make a baby, maybe I could have. I laid the magazine on the narrow counter, cover down. I undid my zipper and pushed down the front of my underwear. And thinking nothing, feeling that I was nothing, nothing of consequence, I took myself in my hand and created friction and heat. I held the cup where it needed to be. That's the end of that chapter. Don't worry, just a little bit more. Finally, I'd like to read a very, very, very short scene, just one page, from When a Sissy Climbs the Mountain in May. The narrator, a middle-aged American living in Japan, and his girlfriend Tommy are hiking in the mountains, enjoying the beautiful yashio leaves. If you look at the back of your program, you can see the yashio leaves. The narrator and his girlfriend, Tommy, are hiking in the mountains, enjoying the beautiful yashio leaves and the komorebi, the light filtering through the leaves. There's a special feeling he gets when he sees the leaves in this light, and he wishes he knew how to express his feelings clearly. He thinks that if in the past he had been able to express such feelings, he might have been better able to help a friend who had lost the will to live. He regrets that he was unable to do anything for that friend. And so in this scene, he asked Tommy to help him express the feelings the yashio leaves and the komorebi elicit from him. Maybe in this scene, you can feel the love and joy that the mountains of Shizuoka have given me. Just a moment. Okay. I want to dedicate this to a very special person. She knows who she is. So these two people are hiking in the mountains of Shizuoka. Tommy, I said, the komorebi, these yashio leaves, these blossoms, If you had to, could you explain the joy they give us to someone who's never been here? Someone living far, far away in a dark, dark place? Tommy put her palm on my breast. She held it there, and she spoke. She may have, over the last couple of months, thought through the English words for what she had to say. But I think the universal words, if there is such a thing, she had found in her very own heart, easily and effortlessly. Her palm on my breast, it made me feel so light. If you focus, she said, if you concentrate on your heart center, you can feel the energy inside yourself. And that is life. That is all life. I think you know this. This energy here in your heart center is calm and peaceful and infinite. You may forget about it sometimes, but it's always here, always. And your energy here connects to all the energy in this world. The energy I feel inside my own heart is also in your heart. We humans are blessed with powerful brains, capable of extraordinary thought. But sometimes our thoughts can control us. And that's when we forget the energy, forget how to feel the energy here. And when we forget this energy here, we can no longer connect to all the energy around us. When you look up at the komorebi or look up at these yashio leaves, the energy you can sense has extraordinary power. The light is energy, and the green is energy, and you see it all with such clarity. It's a stimulus that no heart can shield itself from. So if you have lost touch with the energy here, you will become aware of it again. And if you have not lost touch with it, you will feel its intensity. In either case, you will feel so strongly how much you belong, and you will feel love. And that's why komorebi, look at you. You're smiling. Look at that smile on your face. Look at you. I don't need to tell you this. I'm smiling, I said, because I'm here with you. I'm smiling, I said, because I'm here with you, and you're the most beautiful person I've ever met. Thank you.